everybody. And thanks for coming out today to Civic Hall and the Mayor's Office Community Affairs Unit for helping to organize this event. We're all here for similar reasons, namely that there's a tenant displacement crisis happening in New York, and we all want to try and do something about it before it's too late. So I want to start off by saying how much everyone here appreciates the hard work that various people in this room and elsewhere have been putting in for their communities. There are hundreds of passionate tenants' rights organizations and similar nonprofits in New York, and without them, the city would be in really bad shape. Everyone's doing really amazing work, but the fact of the matter is it's an uphill battle against landlords with virtually unlimited financing and legal teams on the trainer. If you look at those two ends of the spectrum, the landlord side and the tenant side, it's interesting because the landlord side might be well financed, but it's really just a job for them. The tenant side isn't as financed, but they do outnumber them, and they're way more passionate about what they do. It's not just a job, it's a way of life, and there's a lot of meaning and value to what they do every day. So one of the reasons why we organize this event is because technology really does have the power to level the playing field. It's done so in virtually every industry out there except for real estate and housing. And so after this event, everyone's going to receive a follow-up email asking for feedback and suggestions. We'd really appreciate it if you could fill it out. And that way future events will be even better and more effective. This event series, like everything else, is iterative, and we want to constantly refine it and improve it so that it can help achieve the goal of a more level playing field for New Yorkers. We built an app that has the potential to help a lot of people, but it's not meant to be a tech to the rescue solution. Housing issues are a major problem. They won't get fixed overnight. So while this solution may not be perfect, we're hoping it helps make things better for a lot of people. So also, it's important to just mention, even though a lot of people in this room might know, that 75% of New Yorkers rent, which is higher than anywhere else in the nation. And rent burden is currently at around 65%, which is roughly twice that of anywhere else. That means that 65% of most families' paychecks are going towards rent. And that number is probably even higher for low and moderate income families. But people aren't safe in their own homes and neighborhoods because high financial incentives are threatening to displace renters so that some landlords can increase their bottom line. In many cases, this displacement is happening in buildings that receive special tax benefits in exchange for producing affordable housing. And I also want to point out that it's not all landlords, it's only some of them. There are good landlords, you just don't hear about them as much as the bad ones. Good landlords are often taken for granted and underappreciated, and it takes living under a bad one to fully understand that. According to the data that we've analyzed from the city, it seems like roughly 35% of landlords in New York would be considered good based on a statistical analysis. So, housing is a major issue in every city, especially as cities start to become more urbanized. New York City might be the poster child for urbanization in the US. There's over 4,000 complaints per week from tenants about their landlords regarding all sorts of issues ranging from bed bugs to mold to heat and hot water problems. We're in the middle of calculating the damage that slum landlords and negligent landlords cost New York City, but we believe it's upwards of $500 million per year. That's from a range of issues including tenant displacement, evictions, housing court costs, legal fees, health and medical problems, lost tax revenue, building inspections, and way more. That doesn't include the hundreds of millions of dollars needed to fund all the nonprofits and related organizations in the space. But just think about that for a second. $500 million a year. Think about what else that money could be used for. And what's worse is that that's only the tip of the iceberg. These are only financial damages that we're really able to measure. It doesn't include the emotional damages or the ripple effect that occurs because of these actions. Many landlords knowingly break the rules and consider the fines a cost of doing business because it makes economic sense to them to just pay them and not fix problems in the first place. There's other reasons why some landlords don't fix problems. Usually it has to do with trying to get rent-stabilized tenants to vacate, which some of our other speakers are going to be discussing later. But there's very little transparency or accountability from front to back, which starts to believe because New York real estate is one of the most lucratively profitable and highest tax-producing industries out there, definitely in the state and probably in the country. Quick background on myself. My first landlord in New York was this guy named Steve Croman, who some of you might have heard about. But if you haven't, he's the one that was just indicted by the Attorney General's office. And that one indictment took many years and lots of taxpayer dollars just to get him arrested. It's estimated that he single-handedly damaged the lives of 100,000 New York families by means of displacement. So on screen now, this is Rentlogic. It's an apartment rental search engine, and I'm just going to go through it quickly. These are what listings look like on our site. We disclose any kind of problems, like electrical problems, plumbing, mold, rodents, and we rate every building, landlord, and management company from A to F. And all the ratings are based off official New York City government data. So essentially, renters are constantly calling 311 and reporting their problems. The city then sends a building inspector to investigate each problem. We use this information to calculate the ratings. And our whole goal is just to level the playing field between renters and landlords. So, say you're looking for a studio or a one-bedroom between $1,750 and $2,450, you just hit search. And it's going to show you all the listings sorted by quality and by price. So you could click on here and it looks like it could be a good place, but you can see that there's water problems, heat problems, and other issues. And then you can click less than a block away and see something that's almost the same price, but it's rated much higher and there's not nearly as many issues. So the key difference is that we focus on transparency and accountability. We're not really in the real estate business. We just want to deliver this information to renters at the right time. Before people sign a lease, we can help them find a good place that's cheaper and better maintained. But after they're already in a bad situation, it's hard to do anything. Breaking a lease is a difficult and expensive headache. And the point in the rental cycle where we can make a difference is right when someone's deciding where to live. I really believe that this is an Achilles heel and a point that we can collectively exploit to help level the playing field. So we connect to these government databases, analyze building inspections, and look for key indicators of landlord problems, including neglect or displacement. And there are clear trends in buildings that have problems and buildings that don't have problems. On top of that, New York has decades of inspection records online, which is more than enough time to show a trend. So this rating system is based off data we get from the Department of Buildings, Department of Housing Preservation and Development, and the Environmental Control Board, and other sources. The data is hard to understand if you don't have the right background, so we've gotten lots of help from individuals at the Mayor's Office, the Attorney General, Public Advocate, and more just to make sure we have all our bases covered. So we produce this letter grade for every building, property management, or landlord in the city. And the grade is from an E to F. It represents the quality of the building. It has nothing to do with amenities or rental prices. This is how responsive landlords are to tenants' complaints and how good they are at fulfilling their legal duties. It's an important variable to have, especially in a city like New York. And the whole idea is that if people knew about these potential issues before signing a lease, then they wouldn't sign it in the first place. The incentives in the rental market are completely misaligned and they do not favor renters. People hire brokers to represent them during a transaction, but brokers are usually interested in closing a sale as quickly as possible. Now, most brokers are good, but it's hard to know before you work with someone. And on top of that, most renters are inexperienced in the process of finding a place, and it usually takes a few painful tries of learning the hard way to know how it works. Another problem is that it's too easy for brokers to say that they didn't know about issues in a building. So that's one of the reasons why we're making this open and free for everybody. I'm also going to be contacting and promoting this to all the major brokerages because I think that legally, if they know a tool like this exists, then they might be obligated to disclose it to their clients. I'm still looking into it, but any of the legal minds in the audience know the answer, please tell me after. But the system isn't working well, and our platform is really one giant attempt to realign the incentives and make it work better for the renter, who are the customers in every scenario. They're paying the broker, they're paying the landlord, and there is a strength in numbers if we can just convince enough people to move through this kind of a rating filter. I just want to point out again that we're not in the real estate business. Our whole purpose is to stop this kind of landlord negligence. So we look like an apartment rental search engine because that's really just it's really just a tool that we retweak to help accomplish a level playing field. All the other search engines have business models based on charging the landlord or broker in exchange for finding tenants. So for every feature in our product and every business decision we make, we say, how will this benefit renters? Whereas other sites ask, how will this benefit landlords and brokers? Because they're the paying customers. So in this way, they're part of the problem and not part of the solution. And it's not that they don't care about renters, they just don't come first. So we attempt to realign these incentives with what they should have been in the first place. Whatever you're looking for, we'll show you something close by, nearly identical, but often way cheaper and with a better and more expensive landlord and management. And so here's an example of a building that's rated as an F, and you can never tell from the pictures. So once we know what someone's looking for, we just serve them new listings that are the same price range but in better buildings. So this listing is actually $50 cheaper per month, and it doesn't have nearly the same issues. If you see something that you like, you can click contact agent and arrange showing. So the landlord doesn't want to fix the heat because it's cheaper to pay the fines. And if they see it as just a cost of doing business, I'm very interested in seeing what happens when they start to experience real vacancies or have to lower their price. After a building hits a high enough vacancy rate, you'll see how quickly things change. Rent is high, so are mortgages, and I know this is New York and there's a low vacancy rate, but I just don't think that people will pay $2,000 or $3,000 to live in an F when there's always a similar or better price A within a block. And for something like this to work, we need to reach a critical mass. So there's about 45,000 leases signed every month in New York. We need to get to around 150,000 unique users on our platform. And at that point, we'll start to see the system working. But that's a number we need to get at and stay at for an extended period of time. And that's when we think that landlords will start to feel the pain and start to automatically correct what they're doing. So that's the search engine. That's for consumers. The other feature that we have is lookup. You can type in any residential address or landlord name or company or contact associated with the building, and it will show you the building history. So here's Steve Groman, and it shows you 168 buildings that he owns. And you can already see trends just on the side that they're all kind of T's and F's. And then from here you can click on all the individual buildings and see what they're rated and what sort of problems there are. In the coming weeks, you're going to be able to see kind of a building history, more like a credit score. That's one of the first things that will be coming soon. You'll also be able to click a button and see all the raw data and individual violations that were used to calculate the ratings. And we're also going to create a brief summary that explains everything in plain English. I'm pretty sure this can be used in court. Everything is 100% public data from the city, verified by third-party inspectors. We've just digested it and made it easy to understand and more visual. So we're still missing a few pieces, but we're moving pretty quickly. It won't be long until we map most of the data that's out there. And with our service, all good landlords and renters will win, and all bad landlords will lose. Every time someone uses our platform to find an apartment to sign a lease, it creates positive incentives for the good landlords and negative incentives for the bad ones. And every time a user enters our platform and makes an informed decision, it will start to affect these slumlords and negligent landlords. So one day, we hope that this will be able to reduce the amount of load on city systems, and even a slight 2 to 5% improvement in efficiency would save $25 million for the city. And in addition to that, it brings substantial improvements in the quality of life for countless individuals. We also hope that this can take some aspects of housing enforcement and help put it on autopilot. And the way that that would happen is if these negligent landlords lost enough revenue that they started to self-correct their behavior. There's 1.1 million residential buildings in New York City. It's virtually impossible to inspect them all. So think of this as a giant experiment. And if it works, we're going to put it in every city in North America, even ones that don't have the same problems at the same magnitude of New York. We're working with City Council in Toronto, Canada right now to test Rentlogic there too. Toronto has some really bad conditions for renters, but Rentlogic can stop some of these problems before they happen. What's happening in New York right now, or is starting to happen in urban cities all across North America, it's directly related to gentrification and cities becoming more urbanized. No city has perfect policy, and it will take a lot of iterations and improvement to find stuff that works. And there's always going to be a cat and mouse game of businesses trying to maximize their bottom line, even at the expense of people. But this can help curb some parts of the problem, and over time, it's going to be able to help cities make data-driven decisions regarding their housing policy that work in both the short and long run. So That's it for right now. Thank you guys for listening.
So one of the things that makes that all possible is actually the fact that we can rely on data that has been released to the public, right? You notice all this data is coming in, and when that data was released a few years ago as part of the open data infrastructure in New York City, people don't always know where that data is going to go, right? You know, but if you get transparency, get it out there. People, why? What's going to happen? I don't know yet, but we're going to start to see it over the next few years. This is a great example of someone making use of really, really great housing data that you might not know exactly why it needs to be out there. It's so that things that you haven't thought of can happen like this. What we also saw was in the health, we see a very similar letter grading system, right? It's familiar for the restaurant industry. There is some criticism over that, but what we also saw is over the last, since it's been instituted, we've seen actually the letter grades actually get better and better and better and better, showing that incentives actually do drive these businesses. When you have a C on your window, that actually is a really deterrent, and you work very hard to make sure you don't get another one of those C's. So I'd love to see that same thing happen here, and it's a great idea. So thanks for sharing that.